All right. So thank you all for joining our breakout session. It's great to see all of you here. Got about a dozen of you now. So if you could do me a favor and use the chat window on the side of your screen, if you could just say hello and tell us where you're from. So we're very interested to find out where all of those with the best preference and best taste in breakout sessions, where you're coming from. So if you have any questions during our session, you can also use the chat. Pose those questions at any time. We'll try to get to those questions when they come up, and then we'll have a Q&A session kind of at the end of our presentation today. And everybody that's going to be talking today, we've got a nice panel of people. So we'll have all their contact information shared. So feel free to reach out, engage myself, and engage with any of the speakers that we've got. So welcome again to our breakout session, Manufacturing a Conscious Future. So maybe to provide some context for this presentation, I'd like to take a page out of Simon Sinek's book and start with why. And so at sort of the bedrock of Mistletoe and the core values is this innate desire to take global challenges that affect humanity and find novel solutions and create ecosystems and networks that will address these types of crises that we're facing. And tying into the presentation on Audacity earlier, the Audacity community in particular is looking at reinventing the ways that we talk about a city. So starting from ground zero, unlearning all the norms and conventions that we've been brought up with, then we unlock new ways of thinking, new ways of doing. This is kind of where the creativity and innovation comes in. And then finally, we unleash these new understandings and learnings as solutions that can transform our world. So, just your run-of-the-mill Friday kind of stuff, which is why this is such an amazing community to be part of. So in this context, when we start looking at the needs of a city, there are a lot of different areas that need to be taken into consideration. So how do we eat? How do we sleep? How do we stay safe? How do we interact with each other? And there's another set of questions, which is how do we get stuff? How do we make stuff? Where does it come from? And so today's session, we're going to talk about these last few questions. So really all the things that are within the domain of means of production. And so if we look at means of production, as it relates to this graphic here, all of the first order effects of means of production is really on this right-hand side, the infrastructure and production areas. So today we will be sharing some of our Audacity community projects that are dealing with energy, water, housing, manufacturing and making, sustainability and the environment. And so all the projects that we will be walking through today are really taking this values-based approach to problem solving. And so, maybe instead of calling it the means of production, we can call it the pleasantries of production. So taking the means of production and considering second and third order effects. So at the end of this presentation, if there's still time, I can share a little bit more about those additional effects. So hopefully that's a nice primer to set the stage for the projects that we will be presenting today. So the first of the three projects today is the Audacity Microfactory. And this was the area that we used to have our actual in real life open houses before COVID came in. And it was a big inspiration of how can we still have that engagement and outreach to the community during this time of COVID. So this was, here's this little short video. This is showing some of the various artists and builders and makers that kind of came in to help us create this space. And so what you're seeing is some of the behind the scenes of how we actually created the space. And so shortly, yeah, so one of the team members that was really instrumental to get this working is the next speaker. So now I would like to introduce our philosophical resident maker architect Nihao. So Nihao was in one of the earlier panels, so I'll give an introduction to him again here. So he's originally from London, where he practiced residential and exhibition architectural design. He then moved to Japan, where he has been leading the R&D efforts of Sampo, exploring how the DIY culture and process of making can empower and activate individuals. So Sampo, as mentioned earlier, is a Mistletoe portfolio company, and Nihal has just recently moved from Japan to Singapore, where he's leading Sampo Singapore and helping us with a lot of Audacity projects. So over to you, Nihal.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Shane. So based on the values that Shane discussed, the microfactory explores a decentralized model of production. We're exploring how accessibility to making will become critical to help us achieve a more sustainable and resilient system of production for the future. So in essence, the microfactory project begins with the intention to achieve for everyone the ability to make what you need when you need it and to suit your needs. So the hypotheses that we're exploring with the project are that with advanced manufacturing technologies today, we believe that creating accessibility and opportunity through larger communal spaces will ultimately lead towards a more happier and more inclusive community. And with greater exposure, inquiry, and understanding of production and manufacturing cycles across different scales, we'll be better informed and become more aware of our decisions and actions as consumers and makers. So in essence, we believe advanced manufacturing technologies enables equal opportunity for everyone to become collaborators, designers, makers, and is therefore leading us towards a more inclusive and active future where people have deeper and more meaningful relationship with the spaces they live in and the things that they need. So to sum all this up, the microfactory is therefore exploring how we can democratize and distribute means of production for the people to create individually or collectively. And to discuss this, as Shane mentioned previously, we have brought together a couple of projects all addressing different methods and scales of manufacturing that bring about some interesting consideration. All of these projects in some form or another consider this question of how we can decentralize and enable a more accessible means to manufacturing that will lead us towards a more conscious future. So I'm going to begin by introducing the idea of an open ecosystem networks. By definition, it means a free-to-use open innovation environment, which is centered around connecting companies of different sizes and individuals of diverse talents to share their real-life problems, insights, assets, and innovative solutions. Considering this, I would like to discuss how the combination of software and hardware has enabled a more accessible form of distributed and remote manufacturing. So for example, in one of my projects, I'm using parametric design software as a tool to enable individuals to customize their own furnitures by process of editing. So individuals would select an object and this would come with a design interface with various parameters that could be tweaked and adjusted to meet the person's physical, spatial, or activity needs. In the end, the user would then be able to save the 3D model, send it forward to a local decentralized manufacturing lab, much like our microfactory, where they would either be able to be involved in the process of manufacturing it themselves, or they would have it made and delivered so that they would be able to assemble it themselves. Another project, so this is another sample project, which is exploring autonomy of living through mobile architecture. And amongst other initiatives that we had, we developed two products that were intended to empower our customers and activate them through making. Our values were very similar to the traditional craft making and makers community culture. So the first was based on a distributed manufacturing model, where the design was a flatback system, so people could purchase these and have them delivered and could assemble it in a day. This intended to encourage and give confidence to anyone to begin making, no matter their skill level or their age. So it needed to be designed to enable people to complete the project in a day, and needed to give them the satisfaction of precision and craft that really inspires us to continue pursuing and perfecting art. So we could achieve this goal by using CNC technology, more specifically a machine called ShopBot. whereby every part of our kit was an individually unique puzzle piece that made it very intuitive to put together. Sorry. So our second product was a DIY transformational program, which was a 7-day program whereby you as a customer would come and stay with us throughout the duration of this workshop. We would get to know more about you, your interests and your inspirations. And through the process of making a mobile house, we would begin to nudge you to challenge and explore your interest through the making of your mobile house. Now, this was a model where we did not rely on advanced manufacturing, but instead the resources that were readily available, which was at the time our local home center that had a service of cutting parts to dimensions. So we had a shopping list, and once the cut was ready, we'd collect and begin the workshop in our factory. So in essence, the home center became our means to production that enabled us to design and engage with our audience more creatively. Yeah, thanks, Shay.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. So that definitely is part of Microfactory. And we have, as Microfactory is a really amazing space, we have a lot going on in there. And so to continue discussing more bits of the Microfactory, we have Wouter coming to join us. So Wouter is our resident Microfactory additive manufacturing expert and master of disaster. So he spent over 17 years in Japan working in IT and engineering. And he moved to Singapore a few years back to start a fabrication cafe. And so he's spent years playing with 3D printer, laser cutters, and robots. He's also worked on some pretty cool projects with Marina Bay Sands and the Art Science Museum here in Singapore in their sustainability sector. So Wouter will share some more information about some of the stuff that he's doing in Microfactory. Over to you, Wouter.
Cool. Thanks very much, Shane, for that. Welcome to the interesting part of this presentation, the 3D scanning and printing with biopolymers and bioplastics. So traditional systems, as you can see, have one input and one output, ultimately resulting in waste. Until recently, there has been no motivating factor for reducing this waste. And we as humans are better at creating waste than we are at reusing or recycling it. As we progressively move towards a closed loop or a circular system on the far right, we still have waste as an output. Traditional recycling methods for plastics merely delay the inevitable dumping our plastics. So while we can reduce the resources that we use, at this stage, we still have waste issues with the system. So what we're aiming to do at the Microfactory in the near future is to fully close this loop, to not only use the minimum amount of resources, but to rethink and include waste streams and waste products as resources as well. So currently at the Microfactory, we're experimenting with biopolymers and bioplastics and trying to wean ourselves off of oil-based materials. We're looking at waste stream materials such as coconut husks and coffee grinds, or even alternate sources, biopolymers such as sugarcane, potato, or corn starches. And we currently recycle all of our prints, failed or otherwise, at the factory back into pellets for reuse in the printer. Of course, with the recycling process, we lose about 20% of the strength and the characteristics of the original material and must add some new material into the mix. But that's something we can live with at the moment. So imagine we can print furniture just in time for an extra dinner guest or weekend gathering, then being able to grind it back into a pellet form and then make something totally different. For example, an umbrella stand or a planter for your garden. Or we can print a biodegradable planter that dissolves over a growing season into the ground that also provides nutrients for the soil. So at the factory currently, we have the Extrable 3D printer and the 360 gateway scanner that are meant to be easily set up, run anywhere in the world with just a simple scanner or model. And we can start printing out parts using a variety of plastics and bioplastics. We wanted to create a turnkey solution that would be easily accessible by anyone. And we aren't limited just to furniture or chairs. We can even print car body panels, allowing you to change your daily driver for whatever you need to do that day. You can shop one day, you can haul materials the next day, trucking, camping. And this modular approach allows us for a single platform to cover a variety of tasks and is infinitely configurable. So we invited some local designers in Japan to a constraint-based challenge and asked them to think about increasing production with reduced resources. They had to design a 3D printing as the medium and within a 1 kilogram limit. This particular artist you see on this slide came up with a wireframe print of his entire body using the 360 scanner. Other experiments that came about include 4D printing, where the materials react to the local environment and adjust accordingly. In this case, a special type of plastic reacts to heat and moisture to bloom and then die off over a 4-hour period. And in the next slide, we can see the scanner also can capture a kabuki performer and create custom molded costumes and props. And with the simple capture, you can also make and manipulate to make the person dance or move as they would in real life. It's not just a static image. So what can we do with 3D printing? We can print what we need when we need it. We don't need massive production runs or minimum orders. We're able to print anything from food-safe silicone cake molds to titanium engine blades. Using this technology, we can create an exact copy of a 450-year-old ceramic tea bowl, a perfect match in weight and shape, a visual representation of fluid dynamics, or even a pair of custom heels that match your feet and weight distribution. So using this additive manufacturing tech, they have even printed an entire stainless steel bridge in the Netherlands. So what's the future for additive manufacturing? I believe there's 4 things. There's a just-in-time approach to manufacturing what you need and when you need it, using only the minimum amount of resources for your project and product, reducing the waste generated, and even using other waste streams as a resource, and the ability to decentralize the advanced manufacturing. Thank you for your time, and if you do have any interesting ideas or projects, hit us up in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions and work together with you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Wouter. So that's kind of wrapping up the first project that we're presenting today. So we have 2 more. But it's really neat to think about this concept of additive manufacturing or changing the waste streams into inputs, or maybe doing, manufacturing at the point of sale. So you go into a shoe store and they print your shoes right there, or you take your shoes off your feet, they grind it up and it gets made into some, a bag or something. So these processes are really quite interesting to think about. Which leads into some of the work that our next project is, looking at climate adaptive manufacturing. So here, Xinhui, already probably seen her in some of the other panels, are almost Gen Zer, but she's one of our community members at Audacity. And so when she graduated from NTU, she got to go on a backpacking trip. And I think her favorite place was Mongolia, if I remember correctly. But she's been leading our climate adaptive manufacturing project. So over to you.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah. So climate adaptive manufacturing, we want to relook at how advanced manufacturing systems are structured. So I think earlier in one of the panels, there was a comment about decentralization and resources being, when resources are not centralized, they are actually very cost ineffective. So climate adaptive manufacturing actually wants to do that kind of production shifts such that decentralization is a viable option to explore. And yeah, so there's a focus on qualitative customization, localization, and minimization, and carbon footprint minimization. So with the current challenges of like climate change and like the pandemic lockdowns, we see that there is a need to really shift towards microcycles of energy and the production. Yeah. So the hypothesis that shapes the direction of this project, we have like 4 different hypotheses. And the first is the adoption of renewable energy would become so abundant, cheap, and universally available. So we already see like countries ramping up their efforts in it. And I think in the future, it will be so available that there will be a shift away from large-scale power plants and pipelines or cables. So for instance, like solar panels on a rooftop would be able to power the building itself. Also, decentralized communities would be formed as off-grid living becomes easier when different communities have various different sources of energy and essential resources. So individuals would become free from the grid and have much more autonomy in their daily lives. So the developments of waste to energy technologies would also mean that circular economies can form, and that we become it becomes much more common than the linear ones we're used to now. So production materials would come from waste that we consider invaluable now, and hence individual communities would have their resources to make what they need using what they don't want anymore. And especially in the future, we envision that communities and districts would possess the values mentioned by Shane earlier. And in Climate Adaptive, we want to explore some projects and technologies that would help the transition towards this future. So the first technology that we're looking at is carbon capture and utilization. So some ongoing, so like for carbon capture, it was previously explored by like the oil and gas industries to basically do enhanced oil recovery. But now like there's more focus on point source technologies capturing carbon from emissions where it's much more concentrated so that it's more cost effective. But then the underlying technology we're interested in is actually the atmospheric capture of carbon, so which is currently very expensive, but at scale we believe that it will be able to enable individual communities to obtain like their basic resources from carbon in air, such as like food, energy, or like the chemicals and minerals. Yeah. The next technology is water harvesting from air. So in our current climate, especially like in Singapore and around the region, we suffer from extreme humidity. So what if we could use like passive structures such as the Waka Tower or fog nets to pull down some water vapor so that the environment we live in actually becomes more conducive for people, and then we can use the water to supply our daily needs. So like the current dominant technology with this is mechanical refrigeration, which is actually very energy intensive, and it doesn't help emerging economies who don't have the capabilities and infrastructures to channel energy throughout different communities. So the idea is to look at more passive technologies which are actually very suitable for our current climate. Then the other project that we're working on is to design a modular planter box for food resiliency and self-sustainability of a community. So modularity will allow like individual communities to build the planter box according to their needs, but like the backbone design of each of these individual modules would take into account like the characteristics of growing different kinds of crops. So for instance, like sweet potatoes, if we try to grow them in our own gardens, there's a need to like contain them such that they don't overtake the entire garden compared to like in a farm where you have dedicated farm plots. So these are like the kinds of considerations, and we'll look at like what kinds of crops are more nutritious, and then decide like the modular units that would be formed from there, and then this would be used to basically enable economies and communities to be self-sustainable in terms of their food. Yeah, so I think with the whole COVID-19 crisis, we see that developing economies are really struggling with self-sustainability, and then a lot of them are living on a daily wage. So they're kind of left behind by the current system and behind the modular planter box. That's what we try to achieve.
Yeah, great, Xuan. Thanks. So I think that it's very easy to draw some parallels between some of the work that we are looking at in the climate adaptive manufacturing process, as well as the additive manufacturing. So like the planter boxes, being able to decompose, there's some kind of tie-ins with how these different projects are kind of linked together. And some of those amazing processes, talking about carbon capture or atmospheric water capture, those kind of are really closely tied into the next project that we will be sharing. So now we get to speak to Ritika and Kritika. So they're both part of Project Shia. And they were, I think, introduced in some of the earlier panels. But again, the Project Shia is a joint initiative between EcoLabs, which is the Center for Innovation for Energy, and Mistletoe. So they're looking to bring about change in the design of future cities with the concept of sharing and conscious living to sustain the ecosystem. So it's a multidisciplinary team of architects, engineers, designers, technologists. So again, today we have Ritika and Kritika with us. So they'll be sharing a little bit more about how we can rethink this future concept of community. So over to you guys.
Hey, Shri, thanks for introducing us. So before we dive and get to know more about Project Shia, let's scale back and tell you how we started. We started with what if we had to build consciously? We had to understand the triple bottom line, which was environment, social, and economy, which is represented in terms of planet, people, and profit. Moving further, to understand the impact of urbanization on 3Ps, we studied. So in terms of people, it was people living in silos, leading to lack of social cohesiveness, pollution issues that they were facing, shortage to access of resources, and lack of shared urban spaces. This in turn affected the planet as well, leading to deforestation, climate change, rising sea emissions, and excessive utilization of available natural resources. In terms of profit, it was all about exploitation of resources, the unsustainable behavior. People urged to buy more when it was not a necessity. This led to excessive consumption, and the excessive consumption in turn led to social and income inequality and non inclusiveness. So, what we did to change this trend was we focused on people and planet and redefined profit. We redefine profit by changing the mindset towards more sustainable behavior, resource efficiency, and encouraging social inclusiveness. In today's scenario, things that have affected our communities across the world are shortage to water supply, social cohesiveness, shrinking shared community spaces, access to clean basic resources, pollution in terms of air and noise. As mentioned by my friend Shrin, we hope to move to a renewable and decentralized solution, being easily accessible universally at an economic price in the near future. What if communities could build together, thus resulting in breaking silos by increasing social community and collaborative spaces, which in turn will empower the community for an effective co-living and optimized resource utilization? In the same way, in terms of environmental changes such as rising sea level, access to clean air without haze problem, and non-polluted water for consumption, our shift was towards clean energy, renewable resources, and decentralized solutions which could contribute back to the grid. So now let's imagine how our future communities will look like and change when we inculcate the concept of sharing and co-living. This is Project Shia. Shia means sharing. Our motto in Project Shia is to build and prototype 3 testing solutions for sharing communities by involving people and by being resource efficient and using lesser footprint. Over to Ritika to know more about Project Shia in detail.
Thanks, Kritika. So what we started was we realized that we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. So we focused on one person. If we try to reduce the footprint and consumption pattern to an individual and decentralized housing, how does that result in a community shift? Our hypothesis is by saving consumption and reducing the footprint with larger communal spaces, people will be happier and lead to more inclusive societies. In the graphic displayed on the left, we looked at consumption patterns of one person in Singapore. In terms of space, it's 35 square meters as per the government regulation. We're looking at reducing that to 20 square meters without compromising modern comforts, as well as that leads to saving material cost as well as the volume itself for cooling. In terms of water, if we integrate grey water and black water systems on a unit or a community scale, how does that change the way we use water as well as the consumption of it? Lastly, in terms of energy, the main consumption is in cooling of a space. We were researching on the solutions for hybrid or mixed systems, which use passive and active cooling technology to maintain human comfort at 24 degrees. Next, please. Thank you. Okay, so we are looking at a systems approach for a modular shelter to create a self-sustaining shelter with technology solutions plugged in. For example, as Shui had mentioned, If we look at alternative systems for water generation, could we integrate a cooling system as well, which could be dehumidification with drinking water as a byproduct? Have waste cycles that are synergic that could generate electricity as well. In terms of interiors of the dwelling, if we could plug into conscious manufacturing, as Nihal and Walter had mentioned, where we make what we need when we need it. Currently, we're in the process of sourcing solutions in the domain of energy, water, and waste. So if any of you have out-of-the-box solutions or prototypes that you are interested in testing out, please get in touch with us. In terms of our approach, we're using a co-creative approach with multiple stakeholders. So startups could come in, test their solutions at our test site, as well as build a student community to empower the youth to design their future, and work communities, basically to empower them to build what they want. In this regard, we have run a couple of collaborations with students across the world to understand where they want to live. And on the right is some of the impressions of their work. They were really keen on bamboo structures with circular forms, with no clear defined boundaries between the external and internal environment. This itself challenges our notion of conventional air conditioning for thermal comfort. Amphibian houses which work on land as well as water, as well as twisting towers that could rotate to harvest electricity. So we're always keen to work with individuals in varying capacities in terms of educational partners, technology providers, community, and outreach partners. So if any of you would like to know more, share your ideas, and collaborate with us, please visit our booth as well as our website linked below. Over to you, Shane.
All right. Thank you, Kritika and Ritika. Not to be confused. There's a K there. I think they're doppelgangers. They look like they're sitting in the same space, slightly different picture, slightly different earrings. So I guess now we've kind of gone through 3 different projects that we're working on. But it would be great to hear if anyone has any questions or would like to hear more about some of the projects. And if there are questions for any specific people, just let us know and we can add them to the panel. Are there plans for a community to live in Audacity?
Yeah, actually.
So, so actually, there's a few areas that we're looking at. And Nihal can definitely talk more. There's a concept called movable village, which is sort of based off a lot of the DIY maker culture that Sampo originated with their mobile housing. And as we have been moving around the area that we have with JTC, we've started a trial version of that. And so myself, Nihal, Shure, Jaden, and Jeremy are currently staying in our on-grid movable village, an experiment to how to work towards off-grid. But maybe Nihal would like to share more.
Yeah, so we're currently trying to secure the land for the project to go ahead. But essentially, it's going to be a place where we have in resident sort of researchers and artists who come in, and they'll be doing they'll be involved in project basis. We recently had one just for 3 months. 3 months? Was it Attila? We had a guy, we had a neuropsychologist from Hungary. Well, he's from America, but a Hungarian who joined us, and he did a lot of work for our TransTech project. And at that time, he was working with us. And then what happens when you sort of have these people live with you and develop, develop the project through like that is Attila came and then, got to talk with more of the community people, and he started creating more projects than he had originally intended to do. So it was very interesting to sort of see that develop in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had another question from Veronica. But actually, before I get into that, Shen, Ritika, Kritika, would you like to talk about anything about the community living?
So we're looking actually at prototyping, doing 3 prototypes over the next couple of months. So the first iteration is looking at how it would be for two people to live in. As Nihal had mentioned, we're working out the details of the land, but our prototype is to house 1 to 2 people over a period of 2 days, and the next iteration is for 5 people over 1 week, and the last one would be 28 days. We do it as cycles of volunteers who would be keen to stay there. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So hopefully it's not like The Survivor, but
Sign me up. Yeah.
sure.
And so another question that was raised by Veronica Lau is in regards to any legal barriers to implementing some of this in an urban space like Singapore. So fortunately, we've had a very close relationship with JTC as this entire kind of initial seed idea about Project Audacity came to be. And so they've been very closely aligned and have been very supportive with our vision. Another project member, Youngun, from JTC, could speak more about the actual assistance that they've provided. But the area that we are basing a lot of our efforts in is in an area called Jurong Innovation District. And it's been set up as seed, like kind of a playground for a lot of innovative startups, research organizations. And so there's already this very great, vibrant community of innovators and thinkers and doers and startup culture. And so that's kind of the area that we are planning to start this. But I think depending on what area you're at, you'll have to work with the local authorities and find the right way to push forward a project like this. But the intention is with enough the right minds together focused on solving these grand challenges, it makes sense for local authorities, governments, public-private partnerships, research institutions to all get on board. So Shen, would you like to add more on that?
Yeah, I think like what Shane said, it's really about trying to find how we can push the project forward. So, for instance, actually, I think I recently heard that harvesting rainwater in Singapore is actually illegal. So, like, these are actually resources that are owned by the government. So, I think it's also like the approach we choose to take when we work on the project, like it being a fun experimental approach, kind of like loosens up the restrictions a little.
Yeah, we're a motley crew. It's quite fun, the things that we get to do.
I guess innovation is always about breaking something.
Yeah, barriers. And,
Yeah, operating in the gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where's everyone from? Like we can see that we've got about 20 people in here, but doesn't tell us who they are unless you message us. And where are you guys watching from? Manchester, Singapore. Cool. Ishikawa. More Singapore. Philippines. Oh, nice.
Wow.
Malaysia. All right.
Ask Veronica whether like you have some personal interest in some of these projects, or like would you like to share more about yourself?
can she participate?
Yeah, you can request to participate if anybody would like to.
Yeah, if you want to come in, we're happy to welcome you. If you're shy, that's totally fine too. All right. So it looks like we have a few more minutes until our next session coming up. So have we seen anything similar to Audacity anywhere in the world? I think that there's definitely inspired movements that we have taken notice of. If you think of like the Bauhaus movement that started changing the art and culture and society, we can also look to places like Burning Man or things like, that are just doing things differently, that are trying to look at creating an entire ecosystem, a different way of living and engaging in and existing in society.
Actually, quite a bit to say. There was a lot of community activities which had taken place down from where I was, where they helped to build an entire supply power to an entire village through solar power. That was one inspiration which came into me to say, oh, let me research more on renewables and move in this line of environmental and sustainability. Entire community being powered by solar power, something really unique that I came across like a few years back.
Huh. Cool. So I guess I can tell anybody that's here right now, this is the kind of end of our programmed content. We do, however, have still like some chill out breakout sessions. So there's 2 more workshops if you'd like to kind of still hang out and check some things out. We have Global Foods. So that's with another Audacity community member, Erna. So she's working with our Slice Robo Cafe. So she'll be doing a food workshop. And we have another one, which is by Chun, who is the first and only certified Wim Hof instructor in Singapore. So he just has been doing a lot of really fun, interesting things and runs a group called Hyperactive. So he's going to be doing some Wim Hof sessions, so breath work and things like that for about 30 minutes. So hope to see you guys there. It would be great to have you join us.
Did you also mention the Miro board, Shane?
Yeah. So there's a few ways to find us. You can go to our Facebook and go to search for Audacity Global Community. You'll get to see some of the things that we're inspired by and some of the projects we're sharing there. We also have a collaboration board on Miro. So it's a whiteboard that is being made available, so you can engage with that. We will send a link and some instructions to the email address that you signed up to this event with. So that would be a good place to interact and see what's going on. And we're also recording all of this stuff. So we'll, over the coming, once this is all wrapped up, we'll start packaging it up, making it pretty, and making it accessible to all of you.
Sorry, can I add, so for the Miro board, the idea behind it is that we want to have these online events every month. So if you could make your contribution on the board, that will help us with structuring the future panel discussions, and also maybe we could invite you to be part of our events. Yeah.
So we'll close down this session and hope to see you guys in some of the workshops.
Yeah, thank you guys.
The links can be found in the event chat. Bye.
Bye.